So hello, everyone. Those of you who have joined us so far, thank you so much for joining this conversation. My name is Meira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival. I'm sorry you're not seeing my face, but this is how it's going to work. You're just going to hear me, and you will be seeing and hearing our speakers. And I'd like to introduce them now, because these are the filmmakers behind the film SWELL, which screened at the Woodstock Film Festival last October and won the Best Feature Award, and went on to win many awards before and after, and was acquired by IFC Films and had its theatrical release on Friday, March 6th. And actually that evening, Julie Taymor, who did the film Frida and the upcoming film The Glorias, hosted the Q&A with the filmmaker, and she was also on a jury at the Woodstock Film Festival, and she presented Carlo and the filmmakers with the award here. So that was really nice. So we have here with us the writer-director of SWELL, Carlo Mirabella-Davis, and one of the principal producers of the film, Mollye, who also recently won the Producers Award at the Independent Spirit Awards in LA back in February. Not that long ago, but right now it seems like a lifetime ago. And the film cinematographer, Kate Arizmendi. So welcome all of you. So nice to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us. This is wonderful.
So Carlo, I mean, this is, I think, your first feature film.
That's right.
And I know it's a film that is inspired by some experiences that you've been through in your life, or family members. And I find it one of the most special films that I've seen. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what prompted you to write the script. Really, like, if you can just take us back to the very beginning of the process.
Sure.
Process of it.
Absolutely. So the film was inspired by my grandmother, who was a homemaker in the 1950s in an unhappy marriage, who developed various rituals of control. She was an obsessive hand washer who would go through 4 bars of soap a day and 12 bottles of rubbing alcohol a week. And I think she was looking for order in a life she felt increasingly powerless in. And my grandfather, at the behest of the doctors, put her into a mental institution where she was given electroshock therapy, insulin shock therapy, where they induced comas, and a non-consensual lobotomy. And she lost her sense of taste and smell. And I always thought that there was something punitive about it, you know, that she was being punished in a way for not living up to society's expectations of what they felt a wife or a mother should be, and for being different. And so I wanted to make a film about that. But as I was writing, I realized hand washing is not very cinematic, or maybe it's becoming more cinematic now that we're all basically doing it. So I remember seeing a photograph of all the contents of someone's stomach who had pica that had been surgically removed. And all these artifacts were kind of fanned out on a table, like an archaeological dig. And I was fascinated. I wanted to know more. It almost felt like something mystical, like a Holy Communion, and I wanted to know more, and that's how the writing process began.
Okay, thank you. I want to remind the attendees that I'm just going to ask a couple more questions, and in the meantime, I would love for you guys to write in your questions to any of our speakers. You can do it in the Q&A part of it, and I will do my best to give as many questions as possible to the speakers. So please feel free to do that. So Carlo, before we went on live, I mentioned to you the film Far From Heaven.
Right.
And the reason that film came to my mind when I was thinking about your film was one of my thoughts as I watched Far From Heaven, and as I thought about it afterwards, was that this was one of the most perfect films I've seen about one of the most imperfect worlds. Everything about it was so pristine and beautiful. The music, the acting, the cinematography, the art direction, and it was very restrained. It was a very restrained world. But eventually it exploded. When I think about your film and I think about how incredibly beautiful it is, the acting, the colors, the cinematography, the words, and how restrained everybody is, especially the protagonist, and how much she struggles to finally set herself free. And by doing so, she's also setting herself, the audience, free. I wonder if you can speak a little bit about that kind of approach. And then my question is also for Kate, who's the cinematographer. When you your approach to the visuals of the film, did you have in mind something like that you're dealing with in a world that is very restrained and just aching to set itself free? And did that translate at all to your cinematic approach?
Do you want to start, Kate, and I'll
yeah. I mean, I think that the first maybe 2/3 of the film feels so perfect that it doesn't like sometimes feel even believable or real at times, like, or maybe actually really until Hunter discovers pica or discovers this way of control. Everything is like so perfect, and that comes with constraining the camera and limiting colors to 1 or 2 colors a shot. By the end, when she breaks free, colors start to mix in and blend in a way that feel more natural to the real world, where there's a mix of colors in the real world. And just camera work as far as like using handheld sparingly, you know, like for the most part it's dolly or lock-offs, where sometimes she's even fighting the frame itself, you know, like when she's vacuuming and she's literally going in and out of the frame. It feels so tense and constrained. And then there's just very specific moments where we break that and use handheld in a way where she finally feels like she gets like to breathe almost. And the camera is the one that's sort of following her as opposed to like keeping her within this box, which I don't know, in some ways, like it's a frame within a frame. Like the house itself is constraining her, and so is the frame itself. So touch upon that, Carlo?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think you know, that exactly what you said, that idea of, I remember when we were first discussing the cinematography. And you came up with that incredible idea of using master prime lenses so that everything would have that textural, crisp focus. And I'd never heard of master primes before. And the moment that you introduced them and I saw the incredible integrity of the image, and it felt like we were seeing that world through Hunter's eyes, because it gave, and especially also the way you filmed, the sort of Renaissance painting way you filmed close-ups, made every object feel alive in the same way that Hunter might see the world around her, that everything had a soul. And the restraint too. I mean, looking back on those scenes, like the decision to hold back on close-ups, and then when you finally give the audience that, you know, your incredible like shallow depth of field close-up, you feel so connected and bonded to this you know, personal hypnotic experience she's having with the objects.
There's an intimacy that she has with the objects that she doesn't have with like anybody else.
I'm going to now start going to the questions of the attendees, and I'm going to continue this thread with a comment and a question. First of all, a comment from Yul Vasquez, and he's saying that it's beautifully stately. The cinematography, I mean, the look of it. And then we have a question from Laura Kenmotsu, and this is for Kate and Carlo. And Mollye, I have plenty of questions for you too, don't worry. So for Kate and Carlo, what were some of the image references you used for the house and for the motel and mall? Any still photography references? And it's for either one of you.
I think still photography, like Gregory Crewdson, I would say would probably be the biggest one, like feeling of isolation, and I would say we pulled sort of like depending on the scene. I feel like we made this huge Pinterest, and it kind of, you know, like birth we sort of referenced for the dinner scene with the parents in the beginning. I know, like Buffalo 66, I referenced Dogtooth, pulling different bird's eye or close-ups. And I mean, Carlo, you should say too, because like a lot of the films that you referenced I didn't see. So it was like, maybe bring in some more that you pulled. But also, like, I would say like Goodnight Mommy for me, like bringing in sort of a horror, uncomfortable sort of element in a bright world, I thought was really cool. Because a lot of the film is in the daytime, but there is something sort of like uncomfortable and eerie about it in that way. Carlo?
Yeah, I mean, I remember how much fun it was to go through like all of our favorite films and pull the stills and then obsess over the aspects of what was going on in them, and then develop our own, you know, rigid set of camera direction rules that we would then break at key moments. But I remember also, you know, we looked at obviously like Woman Under the Influence was one, you know, Jean Dielman, Chantal Ackerman's film was one as well. And the house itself, because the moment we walked on set, I remember looking around and thinking, this is a Hitchcock film, because all the, you know, the colors, and also the fact that it's kind of this glass display case. You know, she's contained in this sort of invisible prison in a way. And I think that created a lot of fascinating opportunities as far as framing and reflections, which then we got really excited about how to carry on once we left the house, right, Kate? Because that motel was...
Yeah, I think like, you know, certain films, you get endless choices for locations, and you kind of develop an aesthetic based off of rules that you make. But we like kind of had a different situation where we found one place, and we sort of had to work within a space for a lot of the film. So you sort of are given something to work off of. And I feel like we went there and we were inspired by the location itself, and like how we could place certain scenes in certain places where you could get a reflection here, and like Richie could be in the foreground, or Richie could only be in the reflection or something, you know. Like I felt like we sort of like took this space and made it fit with the story in a way that felt original, where we weren't always trying to reference something, you know. Like we did definitely pull references, and but I feel like more than anything, we sort of like, we just made a bunch of rules for the film. Like we just started jotting down all of these different ways that we could like have a feeling of normalcy in certain scenes, and in other times you know, heighten how Hunter feels and get inside of her head, and always feel like we're on Hunter's emotional journey. And the references, you know, it's something that you sort of do in pre-production, where you get really excited about certain things, but then it sort of dwindles away as you start to develop your own, you know, language and work with what you have, which is like your locations and your, you know, your constraints.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that one of the things I remember you discussing a lot was the idea of like how we see Hunter when she's in public with other people versus how we see Hunter when she's alone. And, you know, both isolated and then also having her communal moments with the objects, and how that shifts. And one of the things that I really love about how the film's camera direction shifts is the fact that we start out a lot more stylized, where Hunter's kind of lost in the frame or dominated by the frame. And then as the film progresses, it becomes more and more realistic, both in your camera direction and the production design and costume design, to reflect her psychological journey and movement. I think that was really, really effective.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to, I have a number of more questions that in referencing the visual aspect of the film, but I think I'm going to pivot a little bit from that and go a little bit about, to talk a little bit about the producing aspect of it. And that's from producer Roy Wall, and he's asking, and this is for you, Mollye. Could you please elaborate a bit more on your latest #1 at box office data and on Box Office Mojo? And what do you plan to do with that? And he does end it with a comment that I have to read. You guys are so freaking smart. So,
well, thank you. Well, it just sort of happened this way with the #1 theatrical, because there's this drive-in in Ocala, Florida, and I think it's maybe like the only theater right now that's playing new films, or maybe the only drive-in that is. So it had ended up being that way just by chance, and kind of wonderful. And also I think it's interesting too, because I think that area doesn't normally get indie films like this. So it's opening it up to a different audience than it would normally have.
And the other part of his question was, so how do you plan to use what will you do with that new status, and how is it going to affect the trajectory of your film's marketing?
Well, I mean, we're trying to get the trades maybe to write something about it, but we're trying to get like an article written about it, just because it's fun.
Yeah, of course. There's another question that referencing the producing aspect of it, and that's from Laura Canmuzzo, and she's asking she's curious, how did Joe Wright come on board to be an executive producer of the project?
Well, when we cast Haley Bennett, and Joe is her partner. And so when she decided to do the film, she shared the script with him, and he really loved it, and then met with Carlo, and they really hit it off creatively, and he asked if it would be helpful if he were to come on as an EP, and we said yes, definitely. So he was sort of a creative mentor in a way, I guess, for Carlo, and then for us, having his name attached to the project was helpful with financing and casting the other roles.
Okay, thank you. This is a question probably for Carlo, and it's from Benny Randall, and he's asking, how did you decide on the object that Hunter swallowed? Right.
Well, I remember, I think it was really important, in our conversations that each object would represent a kind of emotional texture or emotional memory in a way. And so for me, the marble, if you listen to the sound design, you can kind of hear distant beach sounds, birds wheeling overhead, someone laughing. I almost thought it could be like a childhood memory of happiness that was sort of something nostalgic about it. And in the cinematography, you can see that, Kate lends the marble this incredible prismatic, amulet-like magic. So there's something about a marble, because it reflects light, that I think makes it seem kind of otherworldly. Whereas the thumbtack is much more of like a dangerous liaison, and you can hear it kind of whispering, to her like Gollum or something. It was also important that in the script that there would be, these emotional, these triggers sort of before each moment where she interacts with the objects that sort of move her into that space. But I think, and Kate can speak to this, that we worked really hard to give each object its own aesthetic, emotional flavor, if you will, right, Kate?
Yeah, I think it starts out more magical and like endearing in this way that like for the ice, for example, it's melting in this way that feels like it's crystals or like a glacier or something, and you get really caught up in that. And same with the marble. but I think, you know, as it progresses, it loses its sense of like magical realism in a way that just starts to feel, not, I guess, more dangerous and more, you know, like there's the time that she goes into the bathroom and she gets the objects that are tucked up underneath the toilet. And there's just like a one shot there that I feel like I remember us talking about, saying it felt like at this point she's just like a drug addict. You know, like it loses its sense of like mystery and sort of when we stop covering the objects in close-ups there, and it's not as intimate and it's not as special and otherworldly. So it sort of, yeah, I guess it changes in that way. But in the beginning, it's yeah, that you get so close to these objects that like it looks like waves or an ocean or something in the marble, and you get like the glow of that on her face, and it's definitely got a sort of heightened realism to it, which is makes it feel.
I have a question here from a production designer, Lisa Myers, and she's, I think it's for either Carlo or for Mollye. And two questions. First of all, what was the process like to find the main location? If you can speak to that. Carlo.
It was, yeah. we did a lot of location scouting, going upstate and looking at houses, knocking on random people's doors. We also had a location scout at the same time, going to other areas. At one point, Joe Wright and Haley were also location scouting. It was, you know, it was tough to find the right place. And actually that house was found by the location scout.
Uh-huh.
There's some weird, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kate.
I was gonna say there's some really weird, happy accidents that, like, there's a marble, like a gigantic marble that's like
right
outside of the front door of the house. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even realize it until like a week into shooting there or something. It was some weird things about it that just like happened to work out perfectly.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. Lisa has another question though. I mean, it's a double question. And she's asking, how many days did you shoot?
We shot for 20 days.
Okay, wow, it was fast.
Yeah.
All of the therapy scenes in one day and all of the hospital scenes in one day.
I forgot that all the hospital scenes were one day. Wow.
Yes, yeah. So we had to get Austin, had to catch a flight to go to his next film. So we had to get it, you know, wrap him out quickly.
And you can only do that with an amazing crew, you know, and an amazing cast, you know, who are so focused.
Yeah.
You had such an incredible crew, Kate. Who
I did. Yeah, definitely.
Very cool.
I have comment/question from Nicholas Bluestein, and he's asking, he says, I love the film. It reminded me in a way of A Woman Under the Influence by Cassavetes, which is obviously a wonderful compliment. And then he's asking, was Hunter's character inspired by Gina Rollins? I don't know if that's
interesting. I love Woman Under the Influence, and it was definitely a big influence on the movie, no pun intended. But no, I wouldn't say that Jenna Rollins' character was like a direct, you know, like I didn't model Hunter on her, but the film itself and the soul of the film was very important to me, and continued to be something that we were, you know, intrigued by and fascinated by, especially since of my grandmother's experience. That sequence where she returns from having been institutionalized is so incredible. And I think also in terms of the fact that Cassavetes will really hold in an uncomfortable moment or hold in a scene for a substantial period of time, I found really inspiring. And I think while, you know, Kate and I were planning out those sequences, living in those spaces became important to us. And also Joe Murphy's incredible editing, the idea of like taking, you know, when to slow down and just live in a space that the audience might want to get out of, but there's important dramatic and emotional moments to be captured there was important to us, right, Kate? I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that comes with you being very bold and confident in your filmmaking, in your directing decisions, and that's always the kind of filmmaking that I like to do. Like, it takes time, and you can linger on a character, you can linger on a shot and feel like you don't need to cut away. Like, I'm much more drawn to longer choreographed shots, or just one, it could just be one shot for the whole scene and you just see it play out. And I think that not everyone is that confident to do that. I think a lot of people try to overcover. And I think that because we were on the same page from the beginning, that sort of like that trickles all the way down through the editing, and you can, like, you get caught up in these situations where like you're running out of time, and some directors will say like, okay, well, let's just get that other close up or that other angle just in case. And then like, now that you have that in the edit, you feel like a need to use it. But I feel like a lot of times you were just on the same page as me, saying like, no, we don't need that. Like, this is the shot that tells everything we need to say. And you still feel emotionally connected, and you're getting the right feeling across, and that, yeah. So that's comes with you being confident in your directing. So,
well, thank you for saying that. I think I got that confidence from you folks, because I could see how, that we were all really excited about what we were getting, and we were all on the same page with the aesthetic. And I would see an incredible frame that you would design, Kate, and suddenly it would be like, my God, this is incredible. And we just kept moving in that vein, and Mollye, it would be so great to talk with you after about the shots or the moments in the acting and the performance. And there was such a beautiful energy on set of enthusiasm and joy about everything that was happening. So it seemed like, well, let's just lean into this. And,
yeah,
it was a real labor of love for everybody, I think, I hope, on set.
Yeah, it was a very good vibe on set.
I have, I'm going to give you first of all a comment, and then I'll go back to another question. There's a comment on Facebook live from Junior Brasoletti. I hope I'm not butchering his last name. And he's just telling you, congrats, great movie, very good actress, love from Brazil.
Awesome.
Love back.
And now I want to ask a question from Amanda Nassim, who is a producer also, and it's for Mollye. Mollye, what was a significant or odd challenge you faced in producing the film? If there's anything that you can extract.
Yeah, I mean, I guess trying to figure out how to shoot the lamb stuff and weird Google searches of like how to slaughter a lamb or without really slaughtering a lamb. I don't know. Carlo, can you think of?
I don't know. I would just say it sounds like it was hard to get the film funded. And it sounds like you guys struggled with the ending of the film. And from what I've heard,
that's true. Yeah, the ending was something that, there were some investors that were very interested in the film, but asked, is there a way to make it less obvious what she chooses to do at the end? And that was something that we all were very adamant about not changing, and felt like it was a really important character. It's her whole character arc getting to that place, and to be able to make that choice. So so that was there were a few financiers that we lost because of that. But yeah, I mean, it's always tough to finance independent films, especially when they're risky and bold. But then we got a group of wonderful financiers that were really supportive throughout the whole process, and still are. So.
I think that just says a lot about the fact that it's worth sticking with your film, even if it does seem bold or weird, and not tweaking it to get more of a mass audience or something. Because if you feel so strongly about it, there's going to be, it might be harder to find that financier, but ultimately it was definitely the right decision. Seems like with the original script.
Yes.
I agree. I mean, and thank you for saying that, Kate. It's really, it's really inspiring. And I remember when I first had the script and I thought, how am I going to get this made? I asked my friend, I said, who are the best producers in the business? And she said, Molly Asher and Minette Louie, but you'll never get them. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to try, and probably won't work out. But I remember that once Mollye came on board, and then she was, she gave me so many incredible, inspiring notes about the script, and her and Minette. When Minette came on board, gave me amazing, kind of feedback, and we really worked on that ending forever. And it was one of those things where I was like, I know when we eventually get it, and Mollye and Minette are like, we're there, that it's going to be worth it, to stick with it. And so I thank you, Mollye and Minette, for fighting with everything you had to get this movie made against all the odds, and sticking with it and supporting the film through thick and thin.
How long of a process was that part that you were workshopping, that part of the script with your producers?
What do you think, Mollye?
Maybe, I think it maybe took us 2 years to from beginning to shooting.
Yeah,
I always forget the timeline of when things.
I have a question that's you kind of answered to already, but perhaps there's a little bit more that you can expand on. And that's still, it's again about funding and getting a project off the ground. So it's from Gene Fisher, and he's asking, what was your initial process to secure funding? And he's asking, was it by leveraging the EPs, the actors on board, anybody else, the producers, etc.?
Yeah, it was the script first, and I think, and Carlo's past work, and the team, I think. But we had financing before we had cast, before we had Haley. We had some financing before we had Haley, and then of course before we had Joe. And it was from people that were interested in the story and what it had to say, and Carlo being an exciting filmmaker.
Right. I have a question here for Kate from Jason Hambach, and he wants to know if you could describe how the collaboration was for you with a production designer.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that we had a lot of discussions about colors and things like that. I mean, I have to say, like, Aaron, there's also constraints that Aaron had to deal with, having a super small budget within, like, to create a millionaire's world. These people are super wealthy. So seeing, we talked about certain colors that we'd want in certain rooms, or also the fact that the house itself had existing colors and how we can incorporate that was a big thing. So we would go over color palettes and wallpaper, and within those constraints, she still had certain things that, like, the red couch, for example, wasn't something that we particularly chose to be red, but it just happened to be something that she found, and it, like, worked with the budget, and it was available, and it turned out to be great. Like, these little pops of color in every single scene work really well, especially when Haley's wardrobe starts to blend in more with her surroundings in certain ways. Like, when her wardrobe starts to get more beige and muted, like, it starts out where she's, this is also speaking of working with Leanna, the costume designer, but between me, Aaron, and Leanna, there was always sort of like one or two colors that were more prominent. And it was like Haley would be the light of the room in the beginning, or at Richie's birthday, where she has like this yellow pop of color. And I wouldn't compete that with any lighting. So my lighting was sort of like complementary to that. And then as she, I think as her pica develops and she starts to, I guess, gain more control over her life, her wardrobe and certain colors in production design become a little more muted. And then certain colors, like lighting and things, start to mix in where there's more intense, like greens when she leaves, or like I take over with certain colors. And so I think it was all just like a discussion on like what was more prominent in the scene, I guess. Or but yeah, I mean, Aaron did an incredible job with this budget to make this and like such an attention to detail, you know, like there's so many little tchotchkes and objects like in the living room and everything that just, I know with discussions with Carlo, it's like, it kind of like goes to these like, it ties in with her like obsession over like little things, which ends up being like her little things that she's swallowed, you know, like, I think, yeah, I mean, you guys, your conversations had a lot to do with that, but also, sorry, the gels in the baby room, that was also Erin's idea. So that was, you know, that becomes the poster. But it was brilliant because it was just, you know, there was no color in that room, and it was, you know, a discussion of like, how do we make the baby room feel like she has a disconnection with the baby, and like it becomes more violent, and that intense red, it just feels like so opposite of a color that someone would choose for a baby room. And that just came from Erin's idea of putting the gels up. So
no, yeah, it was very, very powerful actually. I have a different question for Carlo, and it's really more about the substance or the heart of the film. And this, I mean, the storyline. So it's from Mary Mobijun. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your last name, Mary. And it's for you, Carlo. Do you think deep down that the husband who tried to help his wife with this disease truly loved her, but was swayed by the dominance of his parents?
Interesting question. Yeah, so I mean, I always kind of felt that the world of the family is this incredibly controlling and controlled space. We almost kind of pictured it like this pane of glass with like a crack slowly forming in the side. And Richie, I thought a lot about, you know, like Don Jr. while I was writing Richie, you know, those photographs of Trump Jr. like posing in the woods with like a plaid shirt and dead animals. You know, it's like this desperation to kind of connect to his father's approval, and this sort of toxic masculinity that sort of surrounds everything that Richie does. I think he's very aware of the fact that he's trying to hold on to this kind of alpha male status, and he views himself as being the main character in this story. And Hunt is kind of this supporting role that's supposed to be this, you know, augmenting him. You know, he sees her as this ornament in the house, so like the ornaments that she consumes. Now, in some ways, he's rebelled a little bit from the family, because he chose someone who is not part of their class sphere. And in a way, that shows a little bit of maybe some hidden desire of his to move away from that power structure. But like often happens, he brings her into that world and then expects her to conform to all of the roles that they have waiting for her. And when she doesn't, then he is furious, because this is shaking up the status quo that he expects, that he feels in his sense of privilege should be. So I don't know if he really understands what love is, really. You know what I mean? But I think there's a part of him that feels, you know, connection to her, and you know, that's the conflict within him, and we see him moving through that conflict, and then of course in the end he falls into this you know, sinister place. But it's a dance, and I think Austin Stoll did such a great job of showing that, you know, that sort of tightrope walk that Richie is involved in, and of course, yeah.
Thank you. I have a question that's again for you, Carlo, and this is really for it's about the background for the film. And it's from Sarah Higgins, and she's asking, did you have a relationship with your grandmother before she was committed, and did you have any after?
So yes, I knew my grandmother when I was very little, but I didn't. That was after she got out of the institution. When she was committed to the institution, my mother was about 5 years old, and my aunt, they were both put into foster care, and they sort of bounced around foster care programs and also, you know, living with relatives. And it was a difficult time for my mother. And then when I actually got the case study from the institution, it's a heartbreaking document. There's actually a moment in the case study where my grandmother has to swear to the doctors that she will uphold the duties of a wife, that she will take care of the home, that she will have friends, that she will, in order for them to release her, and it's this, and then the doctors write improved, on the bottom of her case file after that. So, I think it was, yeah, like I said, it was this very emotionally intense experience that happened for our family. And then my grandmother developed agoraphobia afterwards, probably as a response to everything that had happened to her. But despite all that, she was a really, wonderful human being, and found the power in herself to go on and to be a really loving human being, a really compelling human being. So I knew her afterwards. Yeah,
Right.
she was very important to me.
Thank you. I have two questions here that I'm going to try and combine because they both talk about more or less the same thing. And one of them is from Alice Stephens and the other is from Nicholas Blufstein. And they're both asking about your storyboard process. And if you could address how you deal with storyboard. I mean, one of them asking, do you prefer photo board or you use storyboard artist? And the other is just, did you storyboard every shot? So it really is about your approach to storyboarding as you start designing the film.
Yeah. We did storyboard every shot. It's not typical that I would do that, but this has so much control and so much there was so much thought to every single frame that and not a ton of camera movement that it just helped us to do that. So Carlo would sort of sketch out everything, like as we were talking about it, one of us would come up with an idea, or I would pitch something and he would either have me draw it or he would draw it out once we sort of decided on it. So yeah, every single shot had a rough sketch. Not something that we really referenced on set. I feel like we sort of like understood it at that point, or or at least I did. But and then we went to the house and we used some crew members as stand-ins, and we tried to go through as much as possible with a 5D and frame out things so we could really visualize it and make sure that it worked, which is the benefit of having like a single location that you have access to. So yeah, I have a lot of those stills, like that we shot that day that are like exact framing of what we did when we actually started shooting there.
Yeah, that was I mean, for me, one of the things that I'm devoted to is the idea of how to elevate subtext in every aspect of filmmaking. And I was so deeply inspired and to see Kate's imagination at play and how she would elevate the subtext through the camera direction. And so we had a really that process of going through everything, storyboarding everything. And then I forgot that you're right. You did go through and take photographs of every single shot with the crew, and you have all those photos somewhere for the.
Well, that was also on the Tech Scout. Remember we did that other day where we went separately, and then the Tech Scout we did almost every shot. Yeah. And so I have like a bank of the most amazing Artemis photos of like you guys standing in, and
right, I forgot about that.
Everyone had to be in the frame, and like it's really funny because you guys are into it. You like hate being in front of the camera.
Do I? No, I gotta see.
Well, everyone's just like on a Tech Scout, just like standing there like this as I'm framing up like every shot. So they're really great. But
I loved that the one that I got to sit in and stand in with the in the bathroom stall.
Oh, yeah.
And the ice too. Yeah.
Mollye, you were
right.
For quite a few. One of the things that's interesting too is that we were very meticulous about everything. But then what was also great, was that there were moments of spontaneity where we needed to mix it up.
For sure.
And Kate, I was so, it was amazing just to see how you know, you're so precise with everything that we planned when we were going for the precision, but then when we needed to suddenly generate something, like when we got rained out, like the whole sequence of the storm, as a DP, you're also so versatile that you were able to just easily, you know, create these amazing frames in the moment with what we had in that moment. And I remember that scene, if people remember from the movie, where there's lightning, the rainbow. We were rained out, right, Mollye? Because I think we were going to shoot the frat boy scene then or something.
Right.
And we're waiting around. I remember, Kate, you were on the stairs, and I knew something was up because you were fiddling with the camera and looking at the monitor, and you were like, "Oh, come here." And we went up, and you showed me this amazing thing that was going on, which is that Haley was sitting there in the darkness with light, like on her phone, and we just invented that scene right there. But I still don't know how you knew the lightning was going to be in the background and that you left enough room on the side of the frame. How did you know?
I didn't know. I don't know. It's just like one of those magical moments on set. And it, you know, not every actor can just like be thrown in front of the camera too, like last minute, and just improvise something. But Haley was just, I remember we put her out by like standing out by the pool, and it was raining on her, and you just sit back and watch her. Like you sometimes, like, I feel like she doesn't even know what's going to come out, you know, like it's so deep rooted in her that it's just so fun to watch what her performance will be like. So that just comes from her being down to just like wing things too. And then you got those really cool moments that were totally unexpected.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you. I want to let everybody know that we are winding down because it's getting close to 8 o'clock. And we have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to select very few. And those of you whose questions I was not able to get to, my apologies. So I have a question here that I'm going to pose to Mollye specifically. And it's from Kiana McLaughlin. And I think it's really for a producer in general. So what draws you guys, and I'm posing it to you, Mollye, to projects, obviously SWELL in particular, but for future projects as well, meaning really when a project is being presented to you, what makes you decide to go with this one and not that one? Is there a way to articulate that, or is it this sort of?
Oh yeah, there's definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm drawn first and foremost to the filmmaker. In some ways, it's the story comes second. So when I see past work that just seems to have a strong voice or point of view, bold and risky is often what I'm drawn to. And then also, when it comes to the story itself, stories that will start conversation, that are looking at the world and you know, looking at maybe aspects that we don't necessarily want to talk about or don't talk about enough, or worlds that we don't see enough of. So really, it's those two things.
Thank you. I have a comment here from Kate Hoffman, who says that you're all very inspiring. Thank you. So that was very sweet, Kate. And I have a question here. I'm trying to find it. Give me a second. There's a, darn, hold on, give me 1 second. Because I have there was a question here that, okay, I'm not finding it. So I think that there was a question from somebody who I don't find right now, but I was going to use that as the last question for all of you. And that was, if you can choose one particular moment, aspect, something about the whole process of making the film that is your favorite, what would it be? And that's for all three of you.
Interesting.
Mollye, why don't you start? I'll put you on the spot.
Well, for me, you know, since being a part of the, you know, development, prep, production, post, all that, my favorite is being on set. There's nothing like being on set and working with a group of people to make this one beautiful thing. That's my favorite.
Good answer. For me, I think, you spend a lot of time kind of, when you're beginning to work on a movie, sort of in your lair, tinkering on the project. And then this incredible miracle happens, which is all these amazing artists come on to the project and make the story their own. And you see the project through their eyes. And I think the process for me of collaboration was the most exciting thing. And, like working obviously with Kate was incredible, working with Mollye and working with Haley, Haley really delivers a tour de force performance in the film.
Yeah.
It is just transcendent, otherworldly, and she poured every iota of her soul into this movie. And she was, I was just we all were in constant awe of her performance throughout the whole process, just staring at the monitor, just watching her bring this character to life with such clarity and honesty and power and authenticity. And so, and everyone, just the process of how all of our time storyboarding everything and then going to set and seeing it fruition, shooting the thumbtack scene, Kate, was especially amazing.
Yeah.
To see cinematography just come to life there was just so inspiring. And Mollye, just, working with you and Minette was just such an honor. Everybody working with Joe, the editor, and Nathan Halpern's incredible score. I'm just going to start listing all the people because there were so many. Erin McGill's production design, Leanna. It was a wonderful group of people who made this movie.
Yeah.
But before I go to you, Kate, Carlo, what are you working on? What's the next project?
I'm writing. I'm in the sort of H.R. Geiger, gestating pod period of creating things. So I've got a number of different projects I'm working on. There's I'm sort of tinkering with a feminist supernatural horror movie, and I can't wait to make the next film and hope people want to see it. So of
course. Kate?
Yeah, so it's hard to pinpoint enjoying working with one person more than others, because everyone was I feel like I became close friends with everyone if I already wasn't close friends with them, and it was just such an amazing crew of people. But I have to say that working with Haley and watching Haley, it's really, one of my favorite things about working on narrative as a DP is that I can pour my heart and soul into the image, but then as soon as the cameras roll, I'm not really, I get more enthralled and more captivated by a performance than I would the cinematography or the lighting. So it's so much more exciting for me to take a step back and to just enjoy an actor's performance. And so much of the film, which I've never really done before, because there were so many lock-offs, I felt like I left the camera a lot, and I was always with Carlo at the director's monitor, because I just wanted to be there with Carlo and with Mollye and a few other people on the monitor and just watch her, because there was some times that she just did these unexpected things where remember we were zooming in on her and she had the dirt on her hands, and then she just wiped her tear and there was just dirt smeared across her face, and we're all just grabbing each other, just it, so captivated by it and just freaking out. Or we're basically in tears at the monitor, it was just, she really took it to the next level, and it was just so cool to be able to see that, and for her to trust me too, she never doubted how I would shoot her or how I would light her, just 100% trust, and because of that she was able to be super vulnerable, and really dig super deep in the emotion. So
thank you. I think it's a really great tone to end on. You guys were amazing. You gave us so much insight to your process. I think that all of us learned a lot. I know I did. And thank you all to all the attendees. Again, those of you whose questions I didn't get to, I'm sorry, we just can't get to everybody. There were a lot of questions. And good luck. Good luck with the continued success of SWELL. Good luck with your next project. Carlo, stay in touch with us, please. I want to show your next film, all of you. Come to the festival when we have a live festival. I hope we'll have it this fall. And stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you all very, very much. And see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
and happy birthday.
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thank you. Now I'm going to have a little birthday Zoom party. So
Thank you, everybody, for
Yes,
watching
thank you
this.
for your questions.
All right.
absolutely. Take care.
Be
See you
safe.
next time. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.